Hey everybody. Sorry, I haven't picked my teeth. We're gonna go through some quick stuff today. I'll try to keep it under 10 or 12 minutes. I know it's got distracted by my own picture. Hey, I should do my hair. This is my house sitting around us. I should probably start. Okay. So the question we asked in class was how do developed countries develop? How do developing countries develop, and how do we develop the developing? And so we're going to go today over two different paths to development. There are lots, but the two major ones that we talk about in human geography, they're ways of finding effective policies that are also sustainable. So basically, we don't want to get rich quick if we're not going to be able to stay wealthy and stay powerful. We want to find policies that help us find funds. I'm sorry, that help us get money and keep money in our situation. So what we're going to start with today is the first way that countries try to self-develop or get themselves from the periphery to the core, and that's called the self-sufficiency model. India is a great example of this. Basically, you kind of you stop trading with everyone else, because if the core is trying to take advantage of you and exploit you, you don't want interactions with the core. And so you limit major trade with other countries. What's up, North Korea? But India is the great example of this. They got so tired of being used by Europe, they knew that if they continued to trade with Europe, they would continue to be dominated by their businesses. So they stopped trading with other countries, specifically countries in Europe, because they didn't want to be dominated anymore. And how do they close off these goods? Well, the opposite of what we talked about with the EU. They raised tariffs on imports, so it costs a lot more money to bring something into India than it is to buy something that was made in India. The other thing is they set quotas on imports, which means no matter how much rice they need, sorry, I'm really struggling today. Only X amount of rice can be brought into India from other countries. The rest has to be bought local. They require licenses to legal importers. It's sort of the opposite of what NAFTA did, basically. All of this allows for the companies in a country to have some protection from outside, more efficient markets. If you tried to compete, a car company tried to compete with Toyota, there's no way if you could get your hands on a Toyota. But if the country made it illegal for Toyotas to come in, then you'd have a chance to build those cars. And then what you do with all that money that you make is you invest it equally in all local industry and education. It is a modest and slow development, but it is sustainable and safe. And that's what's important, is that if you do it this way, if a country chooses to do it this way, they have some risks that we'll talk about in a second, but mostly it's safe and it's sustainable. You're going to be able to keep growing. You're not just going to get rich quick. But there are some problems, right? Which is local businesses are not always the most efficient businesses. There's a reason McDonald's toys are made in China, and that's because if you made them in different markets, you would have an efficiency problem. You couldn't build them fast enough or cheap enough. So if you say we can only buy certain goods that come from India, and India is not very efficient at making, I don't know, baking soda, then baking soda is going to be more expensive for the consumer. The quality of goods and prices are not always the best. Some countries are just flat out better equipped to make certain things. A great example would be the steel of the United States. For a long time, we had more steel, and so we could make better stuff with steel. And so if you knock off other countries, you don't always get the best product. And a lot of people complain that there's too much government interference. And then as a result, people resort to the black market, illegal importation. That leads to a small rise in crime in that way. The other model we're going to look at is the international trade model. This is a much more aggressive model and a much more dangerous model. Basically, the goal is for a country to find a specific resource or product they specialize in, that only they can do, or that they can do the best. This is called a comparative advantage. You definitely want to write that down. Comparative advantage. And basically it means you have an advantage in this resource compared to other countries. If you have a lot of gold, go crazy. If you got a bunch of cotton, let's go Uzbekistan. Then you're going to really be efficient in cotton and corner the market in cotton. And you're going to only develop the industry of cotton. That way you have this sort of not monopoly, but like a niche in the market that you can really exploit, and make tons of money. And then with that money, you fund development, like, oh, just kidding, like all the stuff we said before, education, infrastructure, all that sort of stuff. Speaking of that, I know we talked about core and periphery, but this is a different model, or a slightly different model. There might be some friction between the two, of how countries modernize or become cores, is how we'd say it for now. There's a guy named Rostow. He has a model of modernization with 5 steps. The first step is traditional society pre-development, which is lots of farms. You can imagine they spend a lot of money on military and other wasteful endeavors. They're basically just protecting themselves, protecting their land, right? That's stage 1. They say that every country sort of started out there. And then stage 2 is setting the stage. It's kind of called the takeoff or transitional society, or the preconditions for the takeoff society. And it's when a country finally is stable enough that they can start investing in infrastructure. And infrastructure are roads and electrical lines and all that sort of stuff that makes everything more efficient. They invest in mechanization and technology for business and agriculture. It's stuff that doesn't immediately pay off, but has an effect on everything, and it takes time to build. Often countries nowadays get help to do those kinds of things. And finally, that leads to stage 3. This is the one you need to know. In fact, knowing Roscoe's stages, you only need to know them all so that you can talk about stage 3, and that's the takeoff. And that's when all of your practice, your industry, all your infrastructure kind of teams together, and you get really good at being productive in a couple of industries. So maybe oil and gas, let's say. And then those industries generate their own trade, and through that trade you make tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of money because you specialized in a comparative advantage market, right? And then the other industries, like your cotton or your farming or whatever, they're still not doing that great, but those industries help them. And then the 4th stage is what's called a drive to maturity, and that's when tech and development of your takeoff resources or markets spread to all the industries of the company. That's when because Ford thought of the what's it called, the assembly line. Well, now you're going to do assembly lines in different stages in different places in your economy as well. And so all that stuff spreads to the other industries, all the money, all that stuff. It's called a regional multiplier. And then you need to write that down. It's when the tech and development of one specific industry spreads its wealth and goodness to the rest of the industries in a nation. And then all of those industries grow rapidly. And with that growth comes skilled workers and education, which then leads us finally to stage 5. U.S. is a stage 5 country. And that's when now everybody is so comfortable we can start, instead of building and scrapping our way up to the top, this is the top where we can finally mass consume. And this is when we shift from a heavy industry to consumer goods, or things that people want to buy. We're no longer trying to get the prerequisites. We're trying to get the fun extra stuff, right? We don't want spinach. We want Oreos. And it increases development even more. Basically, we're building things so we can sell things, so we can buy things, so we can eat things, so we can sell things, so we can buy things. And it's this sort of cycle of growth. And that's where we are in the U.S. And so you need to know all 5 of those for tomorrow. Don't forget, you have quite a bit of reading due on Wednesday. There will be a quiz on this. See you guys tomorrow. Uh-oh. Oh, it's taking too long to turn on.